Hello and good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I can see we have some participants of South America and Eastern Europe, so it's really great to have you all in here tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. This is our first series of 4 webinars. And we start tonight with a little bit of theory. The headline of this webinar is called Introduction to Quantum Response Technology. And I am trying to explain to you tonight what quantum response technology is, as well as a little bit of history about our company. My name is Harold Rauer. I am the managing director of Bruce Copen Laboratories. And I myself have a degree in system and information engineering of the University of Munich. So I've got a more technical physical background than a medical background. But I am in the field of energy medicine since 1993. Since 1991. And I'm working for Bruce Copen since 1993. So now I would like to know also a little bit about you, please. You can have the chat of Zoom, and please type a 1 in the chat of Zoom if you are also a professional practitioner, so that I've got a little bit of a feedback about you as the audience. You can open the chat from the Zoom control panel and then just simply type in a 1 so I know whether you're professional practitioner or what's your background. You can also type in what your background is, would be interesting for me to know. We originally had a little bit more people applied for it, but I don't know, because the different time zones, maybe people also wait for the recording. We're actually recording this webinar tonight, and in a couple of days, we will also put that online in YouTube. So in case you want to double check something or see some sections of the webinar again, you have a chance with doing so in the recording, and we will send you a notification once the recording is online. Great. So as I said, today we have Introduction to Quantum Response Technology. And in the 2 weeks' time, we start with the practical part of this webinar series. And so if you are more interested into how to operate the Mars 3, then please be patient for the next webinar. Today, we're really focusing on theory, and in the next 3 parts of this webinar series, I'll take you through all the bits and pieces of the software and show you everything that the software can do and how you can handle it. Thank you for your feedbacks in the chat. That's very, very much appreciated. So, tonight theory, you might think, well, I don't need really theory or it's boring. But I think a little bit of theory is also for you as a therapist important, as it will deepens your therapeutic confidence. And you're not just pressing some buttons, but you consciously engaging with the information field. And this builds confidence and competence and increases also your credibility with patients or with your clients. And I think it will also enable you to have a better patient communication, because I would have thought that your patients or clients might eventually ask you, how does it work? What are you doing there? And if you understand at least a little bit of the theory, you can answer in a way that's probably simple but profound. And it also explains why field-based balancing can also have an impact and be maybe just as powerful as some other physical treatments. So it will build trust of your clients and will probably also improve their adherence. So, yeah, let's have a look what the next 60 minutes will bring for you. I will just have this brief welcoming and introduction. Then I will just very quickly take you through the history of our company, because I think it's Yeah, I'm a little bit proud of it that we are on the market since 1947. So we are for sure the oldest company in that field. Then I will explain to you the principles of our technology, so a little bit of the scientific background. And I will just very quickly take you through our product portfolio. So I think there are also some people eventually with us which are not practitioners or which don't know us yet. So for them, it might be interesting to have a quick run through our portfolio. And then I will just break it down by introducing once more the next steps, the upcoming webinars. And we, of course, have a Q&A section. If you have any questions during the webinar, during my speech, please feel free to put it in the chat. I will then, at the end of the webinar, read all your questions loud out and will try to answer them as good as possible. For the next webinars, I just want to point out, just if you haven't registered yet, do on our website, www.copen.com. You can enroll for the next 3 practical webinars. They are free also. And in case you're not available that early in the morning or late at night, depending where you are, we will also record these and make them available in YouTube. So what is your takeaway for today? Or what I plan that you might take away from this webinar tonight is an overview of our company and our heritage. And as I said, an introduction into the basic principles of quantum response technology, and have a basic understanding, if you do not have yet, what resonance is and how energetic fields work in the human body. And probably what's new to you is the concept of information, because what we do, we balance people merely with information, not so much with energy. But I will cover that in more details in the next hour. So let's dig into it. The founder of our company is Dr. Bruce Copen. It's not just a fantasy name. He was a real person, and I had the pleasure of meeting him back in 1993. Unfortunately, he passed away much too early in 1998 with being only 75. And he was actually the first after the Second World War who brought frequency therapy to Europe. You might know the history that the whole root of what we are doing is in America. Dr. Albert Abrams has founded what he called the electric reaction of Abrams. He found out that there are correlations between viruses and bacteria and resistor values that he added on variable resistors. I will come back to that later during that webinar. And I saw in your chat that some of you are also working with old MK2 devices. These are the devices that Bruce started first with after Second World War. And these devices are quite similar to what Abraham had designed in the US. And because the American devices had not been available in Europe, or particularly in England, after the Second World War, Bruce started to build his own devices and started selling them in 1947. As I said already, I started the sales in Germany and the German-speaking part of Europe in 1993, and especially merely the MK12 unit. And we also had back in the days the SE5 from the US. And I approached Bruce whether it wouldn't be an idea to program also a software for our devices. And he thought it's a great idea because he was always very much ahead of time. You will see that in the next couple of slides. I'm going to show you that he was always very innovative. And so he loved the idea of me programming a software. So he was really giving the green light for the development of the Mars 3, what became later the Mars 3 and the Scope software. But unfortunately, he passed away in 1998 and couldn't see the launch anymore. But he left the company, 52% of the company to me. So I took the headquarters of the company in March 2012 to Germany, where it is until now. We are here in the area of Munich. And we are a small team. We are 10 people all in all. and have a worldwide network of distributors who are selling our products. You might know some of them if you're from abroad. And yeah, we're providing services. And of course, if you need any repair or anything, you can always reach out to us, and we're trying to help as best as we can. Just a very quick run through our history. You see here a bunch of the original vintage devices Bruce built. One of his first real innovations was in the 1960s. You can see here in the middle of this chart, you see that I have done a small list here of what we call rates, numbers that are associated to either organs or homeopathic remedies or fungi, viruses, bacteria, or allergens or whatever. And this is the basic principle that Albert Abrams has developed around the 1900s in America, that he found out that liver, for example, can be energetically tested when you set a resistor to 48 ohms or the kidneys to 23 ohms and so forth. Later on, we left off that physical unit ohms and we just said liver has the rate, we call it rate 48, and kidney the rate 27 and so forth. And based on that system, which was up to the 60s only for organs, viruses, bacteria, Bruce expanded it to homeopathy and said, well, when I can code a liver with a rate or a kidney with a rate, why cannot I not code also homeopathic remedies? And he developed a system where he could set a rate for, let's say, sulfur or lachesis or whatever, and also set the potency. So it was possible to create remedies by setting the rate, setting the potency, and then putting a neutral substance like sugar draggies or just a pile of water into the cup of the device, let it in there for 10 minutes, and you would have created something which is energetically the same like the original homeopathic remedy. So it gives you a way to simulate homeopathic remedies, because I think today's more than ever, some of the remedies are not available anymore, or you would have to wait the pharmacy for a couple of days until they could be delivered. So this gives you really all the homeopathic remedies you need for your work hands-on. You can immediately create them when needed and hand them out to your client. And today we have expanded this list here for up to 60,000 of these rates that we have in our systems and in our database. But the principle is still the same. We still work with these rates. Then in the 1971s, he was, just cancel that ring. And in 1971, he was also developing a color lamp that was basically a lamp, and he had some color filters that came in front of the lamp, so you could have been doing color therapy. Funny enough, Bruce was in Hamburg, Germany during the war. He was there working for the EMSA, that was the British entertaining department for the soldiers there that have been in Hamburg. So he knew about lighting in theaters, and that is basically the principle how theater lighting worked back in the days. You had a lamp and you put a color filter in front, and he built that unit for color therapy. And later on, he developed, or he copied the concept that he also had used for homeopathy, saying that we have the rates for homeopathic remedies. He did that also with light. He said if you have red light, you could as well work with the rate of red light, or with the rate of orange light, or whatever. And he came up with this coloronic instrument, which was really a color treatment instrument without any color. So you can see there were here two sets of rates, of rate dials here, 6 dials on each side. And on each side, you could code a color rate. So let's say, for example, on the left side, red, on the right side, blue. And then with the dial here in the middle, you could mix these two colors. And actually, the patient would hold the handles here, and would then get the information of that red-blue color mixture. And you can see this plate here. This was for either using the pendulum to diagnose the exact rate that the patient would need, or for putting on a hair witness to do distant treatment. For those of you who are not familiar with our devices, this might be something new and something quite spooky, but yes, you can do distant treatment with our products, and I will also explain to you later how this could work, or how we could understand how this works, and what is the physical principle behind this distant treatment, or this action at a distance. I can see there are already coming some questions in the chat. Please be patient. I will go across all that by the end of the webinar. Then in the 1980s, he developed the EECS card system, which were basically programmable cards. We, again, still have that until today, and Bruce was the first one who did that in the 1980s. I have experienced that myself when I was selling the MK units with this card system. One of our competitors here in Germany, they purchased a device from us with the card system, an MK12, and half a year later they came out with their own card system for their products. So I could really say it's really he was an innovative person, Bruce Copen, and a lot of the things which you might work with today, or which are normal today, even from some of our competitors, go back to Bruce, who first invented these things. This is the MK12. That's the unit we sold the most here in the German-speaking part of Europe. And I have already seen in the chat some of you also still have that, and my mother still have one at home, and we have a lot of people who have still the MK12 and a Mars 3 or one of our other products, and they would never sell the MK12 because they just love that hands-on creating of remedies and so forth. But you must say, on the other hand, if you would run an analysis with the MK12, you would have it all by dowsing or by using a one-hand rod, and usually a test when doing it with an MK12, it takes you about an hour and a half. And here we have our Mars 3, and with the software driven and with the computer aid, within seconds you will have a result. I will give you a full demonstration, as I said, in the next webinar. I will run you through the whole procedure of testing a person, and you will see how quick you can get results with our system. But for today, as I said, we only stick to theory. Please be patient if you want to see how it works, and we'll do that in our next webinar. So in 1998, as I said, unfortunately, Bruce was passing away in May 1998, and we came out with the first Mars 3 prototype by the end of 98. It was a fully automatic computer-aided system. As I said, back then, we put all the rates from Bruce, which were about 12,000 rates, in a database. And we developed a specific algorithm that was able to run a test automatically. Within a couple of seconds, you would have your result. Which rates do you need to balance the patient? And then a little bit later, in 2002, we picked up on the idea that Bruce had this coloronic instrument. Remember, this was a color device without any color. And we built a computer-aided virtual color and sound therapy system, which is the color tuning. We will also talk about that in depth in part 4 of that series, because that's really a module on its own. And I will take an whole hour to take you through all the details of the color tuning. But for now, bear in mind, this was one of the first virtual computer-aided color and sound therapy systems. And back in 2006, we then managed to get the Mars 3 registered as a medical device until 2017, because then, unfortunately, the law in Europe changed, and it had become so difficult, especially the clinical part of it, so that we decided to give back the certificate, because we had the impression through about roughly 10 years that we had the certificate, that you as our customers don't really mind whether it's a medical device or not. We're not selling to any hospitals anyway. So the effort and the money we would have needed to put in to keep up with the certificate that didn't really make up the value that we saw in it. So we gave it back, and today we're selling the Mars and all our products as wellness devices. By 2006 also, we came up with the first software based for, I don't know, maybe you remember them, that these were the pre-mobile time, the pocket PCs. They were available from HP or from Dell. It was before we all had these iPhones and the other smartphones. And we developed a software that allowed the electronic homeopathy on this handheld device. Basically, same principle like in the Mars 3. We had a database with all the rates of the homeopathic remedies. You would just select the remedy that you need, select the potency, and you could create your homeopathic remedy by imprinting a neutral carrier substance like such. Here on this picture, you can see it's just sugar draggies. But of course, you could also use water with alcohol. And today we also have that on iOS. It's our Remedy Pro. Same principle. And in 2008, we came out with the Super Tuning, another color and sound therapy, but this time it was based on physical principles, on the planetary sound. You know, each planet, like for example, the Earth, are of course rotating around their own axis and rotating around the sun. So, and that's creating a huge kind of mechanical oscillator. And we're using these frequencies from the planets and transform them into audible sound and visible light, and use it for therapeutic purposes. We will also come up with a special webinar on the super tuning. That's not announced yet because I will do that together with my wife. And unfortunately, she's at the moment, she hurt her ankle very bad. So she won't be back on track until June or so. So please be patient there as well. But we will come up with a special webinar on the super tuning as well. Here we have just a quick run through. We have some projects which we did especially for Asia. Here you can see my wife on a XXL version of the Mars 3. We did that for China. They thought everything has to be big, so they put the Mars 3 and the computer in a big case where my wife is sitting. This was the therapist place, and on the other side there could be the client sitting, and you could run him through a complete analysis. This is an extended version of the super tuning, which we connected to a water bed. And the water bed, as you can see on the left side, was synchronized to the color of the super tuning. So the whole bed was basically illuminated in the color that has been tested and applied with the super tuning. This was also a very nice project we did for Asia. It's a big cabin with the opening of the door slided open. It was really crazy thing. And the person could sit in there, and again, we could run a full scan of a person and giving suggestions what food supplements to take, what food to avoid, where are eventually food intolerances and so forth. And I said this was for the Chinese market, and here was a smaller version of this large device, which we also did for China. And unfortunately, this was just before the pandemics, and you can see on the right side there was also a section where you could have measured the blood pressure and the temperature of the patient. But we finalized this prototype before the pandemics, and then the pandemics came, and unfortunately the customer who was interested in that product, he didn't survive the pandemic, so it never came crossed the finish line and was stuck in the prototype on the prototype level. But quite a number of interesting products we've been working on. So the radionics heritage that we have, it provides us with valuable insights into the benefits of subtle energy interactions in the human body. And we definitely think that the information field has a vast potential in helping to restore biological systems and physiology. I will give you later an example. What I particularly mean with that, which my wife just had in her clinic, where she was using the possibility of the remote analysis and remote balancing, and helped two little newborns, twins actually, which were going through a very critical phase, and she could perfectly help them with the mastery. I will give you a short rundown later. And we really transitioned from this radionics heritage, which was a rather simple technique, to our quantum response technology, which is really the most advanced evolution of a field we've shaped for generations, really. So while we are so I have mentioned this term for a number of times now. What is quantum response technology? So more or less it's a term that we have created, but you might have from the term itself a rough idea what it is about. But I would like to give you a breakdown how we came to this term and why we use that term. And, you know, the big difference is you might be, especially the one from you who are familiar with radionics and are familiar probably also with the vintage Copen devices. The whole technique is very much on a borderline between what is pure mental and what is physical. So you could say as well, what is spiritual healing, what is physiological or physical healing. And that's why I said before, we are really, taking this to the next level with the quantum response technology, because we are really have a signal path throughout the whole device, and throughout we have an algorithm developed. We really treat the signals that we have, although we know if you talk to a physicist about that, he will tell you that this is all just noise, and you cannot really measure these low signals. But we treat this as it would be real signals that you could measure, that you could work with. And we realized that this is a big difference to devices out in the market, which are more or less amplifications for spiritual energy or for mind energy. There are devices out there that do not have a real physical function, that are more or less like working like a lens for your mental energy. But we realized that if you have a real physical processing, that the effects that you get are stronger. So actually, we have here an application of quantum effects in energy and information medicine, and the energy system of the client provides the answer to what is needed in order to gain back homeostasis. So we use quantum effects. I will explain that in more detail in a minute, which quantum effects we use. And we send information to the patient to find out what does the patient need in order to get healthy again. And we get this answer, this response from the energy system of the patient. It's not like if you're doing classical homeopathy, you have that questionnaire where you ask for 2 hours question after question. And you have to consciously process these questions in order to come to a remedy. No, the energy system of the patient gives an answer, and that's a lot quicker. That goes like this. That's why we can do a set of 200, 300 rates. We can check within a couple of seconds and find out which rates, particularly out of that set of rates, does the patient need in order to get healthy again. And this wouldn't be possible if we would not use these quantum effects. And as I said, I will explain you in a minute what quantum effects we use. But that's why we call this quantum response. We're on this quantum level, and we get the response from the body or from the energy system of the client. And that's how we decide what does the patient need to get back in a balanced state. So, and probably, I mean, I think the term quantum physics is much stressed in our field, and a lot of people are talking about quantum physics and quantum healing and quantum here, quantum there. But honestly, a lot of that has also not very much to do with quantum physics. And I've put here classical physics and quantum physics side by side on the most important items, which most important in terms of what is important for understanding what we are doing. So classical physics, basically Newtonian physics, which actually works on a macroscopic scale, which means it works on all the items we can touch, we can put our hands on. So if I here, for example, have that key, and if I open my finger, that key will drop on the table. And I can do this 100 times. Always the key will fall down on the table or on my keyboard as now. And this will also happen. This will always happen. So this classical physics, it's locally, this all happens here on my desk. It doesn't affect you at home. And it is also determined. We could even, if we would have all the parameters, the weight of the key and the temperature in here and everything, we could even calculate the energy that the key has, and when it touches the table and so forth. There's a lot of stuff we could calculate, and we could predict, and we could just determine and say that whenever we do that experiment, the same thing will happen. The key will fall down. So it's local. It's here in my office at the moment. It's bound to space and time. As I said, it will have no effect. You will not suddenly have the key appearing on your table, or when you are at home, wherever. It will not suddenly appear in your office. It will still be here. It's bound to space and time. It's predictable and it's reproducible. So, and when we come to quantum physics, that's a type of physics. I will probably just briefly tell that anecdote of the guy who started it all. It was Max Planck, German physicist, who did his first observations in 1900, which led him later then to quantum physics. It's funny enough, he was in a musical family, and he also was playing violin very well. And when it came to the decision which courses he should take at university, a good friend of them, he was a physicist of the family, he gave him the advice not to study physics, because back in the days before the 1900s, he said, this physicist friend of the family said, we know everything in physics, and so it's better you study music, play your violin, and you will have a happy life. God bless, Max Planck didn't decide to study music. He decided to study physics, and opened or laid the foundation for a whole new world, what later became quantum physics, which is actually the physics of the subatomic scales. It's really on the micro scale, on the subatomic scales. All the quantum physics laws, they only have action on this subatomic level. So, but there, very interesting things happen. Suddenly, things are not local anymore. So to speak with the example of the key again, it's really, if I would drop that key on the table, it really could suddenly appear on your table, not on mine anymore. That's what called non-locality. In fact, that was one of the things of quantum physics that brought Einstein into an opposite position to quantum physics, because he said it's not possible that there is action at a distance. And the equations of physics, of quantum physics, have very early shown that there must be an effect at the distance, even on large scales. So in the 1983, there was a French guy, Alain Aspect, who really did the first experiment that proved that there is really an effect at the distance, and the effect is at the immediate time. So let me give you an example. What Alain Aspect, for example, did, they took photons and sent them in two separate directions, and they measured one observable of a photon, which is its polarization, is how it is in space and time. And they realized that when they measure the polarization of the photon that went down that way, and they found out, for example, this has polarization 0 degree, they immediately, it looks like the photon on the other way changed to behave the same way like this photon that has just been measured. And actually, there is another effect in quantum physics which says the more you know about, for example, the place in space-time where a photon is, the less you can tell about its speed. So that's what is called the observer effect. So it looks like once you're measuring the speed of the photon, you cannot measure anymore where it is. It looks like the observer has somehow an effect on the experiment itself. That's what's called the observer effect. I have to further down here in my list. And this is here, the observer effect. And so quantum physics is basically transforming space and time. I will have another chart later that explains that in more detail. So, and remember when we talk about a distant healing, that it's possible, for example, if I would have a hair sample of one of you who are probably in Miami or wherever, and I could run a scan here and I could run a balancing on you, and that would have an effect of you immediately, even if you're in as I said, in Miami, or if you are somewhere in Asia, doesn't matter, anywhere on the planet, even if you would be an astronaut and would be up on the moon, it would have an effect on you. So, and that, of course, cannot be understood with classical physics, because in classical physics, we have electromagnetic waves and they travel with the speed of light. So it takes a certain time until a signal, if you were on the moon, if a signal from here would reach the moon. But not so with the distant treatment that we experience when we're working with our systems. So we must be more or less on this quantum level. Another thing which eventually the people of you who work already with our system have experienced, the tests that we do, they are not reproducible. So if you run a test once, you run it a second time after 1 minute, you get a different result. And that's also due to this quantum effects that we have here. Because in quantum physics, experiments are also, or observations are also not reproducible. And they're also not predictable. So if we would be here now all like a little bit in Alice in Wonderland, if we could zoom us down to the subatomic level, and we would be still sitting here and joining each other. And I would repeat this experiment with the key, and I would open my hand, and eventually 60% of the time, the key would not drop down. It would just stay here, or just drop down 2-3 centimeters or something, or would stay somewhere in between here and the table surface. And every time I repeat that experiment, I could not predict, will the key stay here? Will it stay here? Will it drop the table surface? That's just not predictable. It's just stochastically, I could say, to a certain percentage, the key will stay here or there or there. So, but I could not predict it in 100% like I could do in classical physics, where an experiment is always predictable. So, and from this non-predictable phenomenons, it also follows that it is not reproducible. And you might ask, well, why could it be if I run, for example, a food supplement test for a person where it comes out you should take this food supplement, why could this be not reproducible and still have a therapeutic effect? That is a very good question. Keep it in mind, and I will give you the answer while we move on through our slides here, because that has something to do with the level we're working on. We're not working on the biochemical level. We're not working on the physical level. We're working on the information level. And so whenever we run a test, we will get the information what the system will need at that point in time, at that moment. And I had a very interesting experience early this year. I was in Singapore, where Joey Yap had a huge conference on Chinese astrology. And I don't know if you know him. If you don't, check him out. He's really a great guy. It's joeyyap.com. And he was reading charts to the audience. And by a certain time, let's say he was reading the chart at 12 o'clock, so he used certain charts to read, to answer the questions of the people. And by 2 o'clock, they handed out new charts to him. And I later asked, why did you get new charts? And they said, well, because the planetary constellation or the cosmic constellation has changed. So, of course, they couldn't do that every second. But what that means at the end of the day is the same that we are facing when we're doing an analysis with the Mars 3. At the moment we're asking the question, what does the patient need to get relief on his bowel syndrome? Or what does the patient need to have an increase in muscle function? What food supplements does he need? At that moment where we ask the question, we get the result, and that is then the result we work with. And please note my comment here below. This is very interesting because in the last couple of years, there were more and more foundings in science that although, of course, the quantum physical effects work on a subatomic scale, they have also kind of feedback into the macroscopic scale in biology. For example, photosynthesis cannot be explained or can. If you use classical physics, you do not understand how electrons are moving in a leaf, for example. But if you take quantum physics into consideration, it will become crystal clear. And in one of the last editions of the Scientific American magazine, there was an article about quantum cognition that also probably our thinking works, or our brain uses quantum effects for thinking, and that's what is called quantum cognition. So if you're interested in that, do your research in the internet. It's really interesting that a lot of biological effects can be explained either at all with quantum physics or better with quantum physics than with any classical approaches. So now my PowerPoint is stuck. So I hope you can already get a little bit of the idea why we use the term quantum. And what you might be interested now in is what can our quantum response technology be used for? Well, those of you who work with our instruments, you know that we can do an analysis. At the moment, we have up to 60,000 what we call rates in the system. The rates are basically just figures, just numbers. And we have a developed a special algorithm that can, if you scan in a patient witness, a blood sample, a hair sample, or if the patient is sitting next to you, he puts his hand on the hand applicators, you scan him in, and our algorithm can find which rates go into resonance with the patient. So, and that means which rates does the patient need to get back in a balanced state. And I don't know if you have a clear understanding of what resonance is, but I will explain that also in a minute. And when we found the rates that we need for balancing, and we do not only get the rates that we need for balancing, but we also get a sort of a weighting. We have a percentage from 0 to 100%. And the higher the percentage is, the more important the rate is for the health state of the patient. So, and we use these same rates that we found in the analysis, we use for balancing. So we apply these same rates to give basically an isopathic stimulus to the system. And thus we try to balance the system. Another option that we have is we can imprint carrier substances. I have told you before, we have this Homeo Expert, which is now the Remedy Pro, for imprinting carrier substances such like sugar draggies, globules, water, whatever. You could also use cream as a carrier substance for the skin, for example. There's a lot of possibilities. We did also do a pilot study once for a clothes manufacturer where we imprinted actually the garnet for making clothes, sports underwear. And so there's a lot of different material that can be used as a carrier. I have a friend who works in agriculture with our system, and he imprints biochar, for example, as a carrier substance, and then uses it more or less as a fertilizer. So there's a lot of possibilities for substances that can be imprinted, and that can also be used in order to balance the system. And also we can, of course, balance a client directly if he puts his hands on the hand applicators. As I said now a couple of times, I will show you this in the next 3 parts of the webinar where it's more practical. But we could do also this distant broadcasting. We call it broadcasting when we do a balancing over the distance. So, and again, what is a rate? A rate is, I have shown you before, where this liver 48, kidney 37, and so forth. A rate is basically a pure numeric value. It's no frequency. That's very important. And you will see later that what's the difference between a frequency and a rate, which is a pure information, really. And as I said before, Abrams, the founder of that whole system, he had the correlation between, let's say, the organ and an ohmic value, but we leave out the ohm for now. We just use the numeric value. So we don't say kidney is 37 ohms. We just say kidney has the rate 37. So in rates on an informational level equal basically frequencies on an energetic level. This is already very important because this indicates that we're working different levels here. Frequencies are on an energetic level and the rates are on an information level. So we could eventually say that rates are frequency equivalents, but they are definitely not the same. And rates are more or less codes for the informational content of any substance, be it an organ, be it an homeopathic remedy, be it flower incense, be it a nosode, and so forth. And it can be used for analysis and balancing. And some of you might know these guys here. These are so-called test kits. These are small vials with, in this case here, for example, Chinese herbs. And I can't believe it, but there are still companies out today which sell these. And there are still companies out today that sell devices where you can test with these kind of vials. And you would need to go through vial by vial with a pendulum or with a tensor and find out which vial, in this case here, which Chinese herb does the patient need. And with our system, you could just scan in this vial into our database. In this case here with the Chinese herbs, we've already done that. You scan it in the database and you use that and you get our algorithm to check out which herb does the patient needs. And within a couple of seconds, you have the result and know which herbs do you need to prescribe to the patient. So, and there are also, besides scanning in a substance, there are also more possibilities how you can get information into our database. I will, if you are keen on that, enroll for the next webinar for part 2, or the database is part 3, and I will show you all the possibilities how you can get information into our database. And I told you before that on the analysis, we observe one of several possible patterns on an information level. And this is really very important. And that's why the reproducibility does not really play a role. I think all of you who work with the Mars 3 and have experience with the Mars 3 might eventually be able to sign that. And because we have this one several possible pattern on an information level, and we use actually the principle of resonance to determine which rate do we need to bring the system back into a balanced state. And when balancing, we apply the same rates and give thus an isopathic stimulus to the system that we have found in the analysis to balance the system. And as I said, this balancing could either be done in person or on a carrier substance or through the distance. And this is really, I think, an advantage which cannot be pointed out enough. As I said, my wife just recently had an experience with one of her patients. It's actually a newborn. There were two twins with preterm birth. And one of the little girls, the trachea had been hurt through intubation because they need to intubate the little girl. And very interesting, the Mars 3 scan my wife did showed already that the trachea had been hurt. And my wife was really was going through every phase with that these little girls were going through with the Mars 3. And because there was scar tissue forming through the intubation, and so the little baby finally developed a pinhole tracheal stenosis, which is a very, very tiny hole. My wife showed me the picture from the doctors. It was a really tiny little hole where the little girl was breathing through, really pinhead size. And they placed actually a balloon in the trachea and widen the hole and hoped that it stayed open. And my wife did a broadcasting, and besides some other rates that she used, she was actually using an affirmation. She was just programming in the hole stays open and enables full breathing. And normally the prognosis was that this treatment with the balloon had to be repeated 2 or 3 times, but luckily the hole really stayed open, and so the little girl didn't need any more treatment, and also the scar tissue didn't grow any further. So I think there is no other system out there where you can do that, where you can really actually describe the situation that the client is in and use that as a treatment. And that's really a big advantage of the system that we have. Of course, you could also test for other things, for food intolerance, for loads, for virus, bacteria, fungi, environmental toxin, heavy metals, for which vitamins and the minerals the patient does need, for organic disbalances, for food supplements, etc. As I said, we have a total of 60,000 rates in the database, and I will cover all these, well, not all the rates, but I will give you a good overview in part 3 of that webinar series when we are discussing the database. So the question is eventually, what is resonance? And basically, I just want to touch that very briefly because I can see we're nearly running out of time. I hope you don't mind me making this a little bit longer. I hope you do not have any dinner planned, or yeah, let's see. I try to make as quick as possible, but just want to cover a couple of little things. And if you have to quit, remember we still have a recording, and you can watch the remaining of this webinar later whenever it's convenient for you. So what is resonance? Resonance is basically a physical principle. I have illustrated this here with tuning forks. And imagine we would have here a tuning fork, and I would hit that, and actually you could imagine that the tongues of the fork would swing sideways. And if we would probably film that and we would slow it down, we could count how many swings per second the the tongues of the tuning fork would do. So, and let's just say they would eventually swing backwards and forwards 100 times. We could say that this tuning fork is swinging with a frequency of 100 hertz. So the physical term hertz prescribes any repeating system. So any system that is going in circles or it's repeating its state, like the tuning forks, which are swinging sidewards, then back to the middle, and then to the other side. And once they repeat a full cycle, and if they do this once per second, we will call this 1 hertz. If they do it twice per second, we'll say it's the tuning fork swing with 2 hertz. If it's doing 5 times per second, we will say it's 5 hertz. And if it's doing 100 times per second, we will say the tuning fork is swinging with a frequency of 100 hertz. So, and if we would have this tuning fork vibrating, it obviously will also admit the molecules in the air to vibrate in the same frequency. And if we have a tuning fork next to it, eventually the second tuning fork, if it's also tuned to 100 hertz, it will start swinging as well. So one tuning fork can, by means of resonance, bring a second tuning fork also to swinging. Just the important thing is the second tuning fork has to have the same, what is called resonance frequency of 100 hertz. If the second tuning fork would be constructed a different way, so that it, for example, swings with 110 hertz, it would not start to resonate with the first tuning fork. The same principle we use in acoustic instruments. You have a string, and remember or imagine you have a string on a guitar, and you plug it with your finger. And again, if we would film that, we could eventually count how often per second the string swings up and down. And again, let's say it's doing it 440 times. We could say it's swinging with 440 hertz, or in music we then say it's a tone A. And just because the string is mounted on the guitar, and the guitar is made of wood, and the wood is also able to swing with these 440 hertz, it amplifies actually the swinging of the string and gives an audible sound. If you imagine taking the string off the guitar and mounting it on a concrement wall, and you would then plug the string, you would eventually only hear a very soft sound. Just because the huge concrement wall is not able to swing with the 440 hertz of that string. So it's not going into resonance with that string, because it's not able to swing at that frequency. The concrement wall would eventually go into resonance with much lower frequencies, like 0.5 hertz or 1 hertz or whatever. So that's why, for example, if troops march over bridges, they are not allowed to march with synchronized steps. They have to walk. Everybody have to walk separately, because if they would walk synchronized steps, which is eventually a frequency of 1-2 hertz, this could really start to bring the bridge into a resonance frequency, and so the bridge could eventually start swinging and could actually finally break down. So if we have a more technical sketch here, we can see if we have a excitation oscillation, which is this orange curve here, sinus curve, and we have a certain resonance frequency where and resonance occurs. The resonance effect creates an amplification of that excitation oscillation. So to finally have a resonance oscillation, which could have a much higher amplitude or much more energy than the original excitation oscillation. Like we have on the example of the guitar, we plug the guitar string, and the resonance body of the guitar amplifies it. You have in comparison an electric guitar. If you have an electric guitar which is not plugged in and you plug the string, it's only a very soft tone because the wood of the electric guitar is not constructed in a way to acoustically amplify the swinging of the string. Only an acoustic guitar is constructed to do that, and thus amplifies the sound waves and makes it audible. So, and we use the same resonance principle in our technology. We have a stimulating vibration. For example, let's say we take the vibration of a virus, and the resonating cell would, for example, be the hair sample. And if there is a resonance between the virus, let's say it's, for example, Coxsackie, and the hair sample, we would detect a resonance between the two. And remember, that would lead to an amplification, and we could detect that amplification and also measure how strong the amplification is, to speak with the guitar, how loud the sound is, and give that out on a scale from a 0 to 100%. Or, you know, if you work with the classical MK12 devices, they had overfunction, underfunction from 0 to 10, or even on the Mars 3, you can switch to the scale overfunction, underfunction, and measure how strong the resonance is, which gives you an indication of how much is the client, which hair sample you examine, how much is that client affected by that Coxsackie virus. But please note, this is only a model, because if you remember what I said before, we are not talking frequencies, we're talking information. But on information level, this whole thing is much more abstract. The principle is the same. On the information level, we just not use we use correlation, but the principle, as I said, is similar to this resonation effect, to this resonating principle we have here. And I think it works as a good example also eventually to explain to your clients how resonance works and how bioresonance works. What happens when you test a vial with a pendulum and a patient. It's the same thing. With the pendulum, you detect the resonance, and the stronger the pendulum swings, the stronger the resonance between that test vial and the patient is. So let's go a bit deeper now. And I've given you a lot of terms. I was talking a lot about information about energy level, information level, and I would like to break it down now a little bit more for you. So you have a deeper understanding of what these terms really mean, and especially mean in relation to what we do. There's a very interesting part in science which is called astrobiology, and this is basically research, or these are people, these are merely biologists, which try to figure out how could life be on other planets. At the moment, there is no doubt that there will be other planets out there where life is. It's just we haven't discovered them yet, of course. But this astrobiology, they think about what could be the principles of life on other planets, and actually that they came up with a definition of life, and they write it with a Y instead of an I, and basically defined this life is life as we don't know it. But the interesting thing is they came up with 4 principles that life should have on other planets. But funny enough, this is also 4 principles which could define life on Earth. And because every living organism has these 4 principles, or embodies these 4 principles. And as you know, it's difficult to say when is somebody alive, when is somebody dead. It's basically just a medical definition when somebody is dead. But from the bioenergetic point of view, it's not so clear when somebody is alive, when somebody is dead. You could say when the life force, when the energy exits the body, then somebody is really dead. But these 4 principles are found in every living organism. So let's start here on the top left. Energy metabolism, such as food intake and utilization. Every bacteria, every fungus, every living organism on Earth has an energy metabolism, as well as self-preservation and reproduction. Every living organism on Earth reproduces itself, and in one or more complex form. Bacteria just grow, and animals, human beings, they grow children and so forth. So that's also a principle that every living organism embodies. And now we come to a principle which is very important for us. That's homeostasis. Homeostasis is basically the ability to keep up a balanced state. And I will talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And here we got our term information again, taking in and processing information from the environment. And that's also a very interesting point. And that's also one of the reasons why our tests cannot be reproducible, because we are an open system that is taking in information in every second and processes that information. And that's a big thing in medical research. In medical research, the human body is often treated as a black box. It's like a white mouse in a laboratory, not interacting with the environment, not having any communication, getting controlled food and everything. But that's not actually how we human beings are. We are living, we are interacting, we have social interactions, we are talking to other people, we are eating, and so we are taking in tons of information every day, every second. Actually, I don't remember the figure how many bits our brain is processing by every second, but it's enormous. And also from external, but of course also from internal. Your body has a constant feedback mechanisms to the brain, which the brain is processing. So we are constantly processing information, and this is also one typical point of living objects or living organisms. So let's take these two factors, homeostasis and information, further and see what it's got to do with our quantum response technology. So let's further explore what is homeostasis. So we could eventually come up with a definition of disease under the aspect of homeostasis. So a possible definition of the disease is the disability of a system to keep up a balanced state. So, and I have this little barrel here to illustrate what we mean by that. So imagine your body or the body of your client is this poisoning barrel here, and it slowly fills up with all kind of things. This is this kind of information that we just talked before about, or the substances we take in, the metabolism we have. So we have allergens from food, from the nature, we have toxins, we have radioactivity eventually, we have electrosmog, which becomes very, very much of a problem in the last 20 years. That also what puzzles me a little bit when I'm talking to classical homeopaths. We, for example, use, and again, we will touch that in our practical parts, part 2, 3, and 4 of this webinar series. We can go up to very, very high potencies. They go up to 31 million and even higher. And classical homeopaths might ask, well, why do you need that? In the time back when Hahnemann was inventing homeopathy and was working with the C30, or eventually, I don't know, I think he didn't even use a C100. we didn't have electrosmog. We didn't have the chemical industry with all their poisons and toxins that even if you're a vegetarian, you take in a load of toxins every day. So and these are all factors of modern life which have came up since the 1950s, 1960s, which didn't exist 100 years ago. So and these things do all fill up this poison barrel. And as long as our body is able to keep homeostasis, for example, to have this detox capacity here, as long as this little is open and we can detox, as long as that is the case, it's no problem. It just becomes a problem when the detox capacity decreases and the barrel, we have an overflow of that barrel. Then suddenly we create what we call symptoms. And the classical approach in medicine, and I must say also in naturopathic medicine, that was one of the of my big discoveries when I was on an exhibition the first time, is to take a cloth and wipe away the symptoms. And the conventional medicine is doing that with painkillers, with antibiotics, with cortisone. And a lot of the naturopaths are doing this with herbs, with homeopathic remedies, but the thinking is the same. We have a very strict thinking of cause and effect. It's very linear. We think there's a symptom, we take something to get away with the symptom. But the problem is that will help eventually, but still these things are flowing in here, and it's just a question of time until the barrel will have another overflow, probably in a different area, not there anymore, but probably here or probably there. So this is, for example, the knee. This is then the circulatory system. These are eventually the kidneys. The problem still remains. And so homeostasis refers actually to a balanced state, to an equilibrium. And that's now the important thing. We are an open and dynamic system. And through internal regulation processes, this one here, through internal regulation processes, this open dynamic system is able to keep this balanced state. And this is very important, and we will discuss these regulation processes in a little bit more detail, because this is really something I discovered when I was going to the first exhibition, and I was listening to some lectures there. The thinking in naturopathy and in conventional medicine is very linear, cause and effect. The only kind of therapy which has a more complex thinking is TCM. They have the idea of 5 elements. They have the idea that the organs have an interaction and interact with each other and also have an effect to each other. I will explain that in more detail. And now I just got the latest issue of Scientific American, because I'm reading that regularly. And now they, for example, found that the microbiome in the stomach, in the intestine, large intestine, has an effect on depression eventually, or has an effect on the immune system. 20 years ago, if you would have said that, conventional medicine would have said, well, that's rubbish, that's quacksalvery. But now they suddenly realize that these things do have an effect. So, but to understand the way we are working a little bit more, we have to have a different approach to reality. We have, for example, here the energy field of the body. This is the energy field. We could also say this is the aura. If you're following TCM, we have energy flowing through the organism in meridians. And we could say if there is an energetic blockage, and as I just showed you with this poison barrel, this could be through the environment, through noise, through pollution, and so forth, then this could create a blockage in the energetic flow of the body, and thus it could create a symptom or a chronic disease even. And also psychosocial stress. It's not only substances, it's also on the psychological level. And then we have a lot of energetic therapeutic means like frequency therapy, for example, or acupuncture, or a lot of physiotherapy that works on this energetic, on this material, on this body level, and on this energetic level. But there is another level, and here comes again this term information, the info field, or the morphogenetic field. Now, there is a very, very substantial thing in our reality, and that's the how things, the structure that things have. I don't know about your education in biology, but you might have heard about it, that of course we all have, their proteins are one of the most important things in a biological system, and we do understand what substances proteins are made of, and we also eventually are able to synthesize some proteins in laboratory. But the big problem with proteins is that they have a structure, a geometrical structure. And this geometrical structure is very important for the function of the protein. And it's not possible for us to imitate, or eventually sometimes it is, yes, but I don't remember again the figure, but I think it's 90% or so of the proteins we don't know about their geometrical structure. And yet the geometrical structure of the protein is very important for the function that a protein has. So, and English biologist and philosopher, Rupert Sheldrake, he proposed that there are form-giving fields in nature, which he called form-giving. It's morphogenetic. Morphogenesis is Greek and is basically the generation of the form, or how the form evolves. And he proposed that there are morphogenetic fields which define the geometrical structure that a protein has, or that an organ has. With organs, it's the same. In the laboratory, you could grow liver tissues, but you could never grow a liver as an organ, because again, you have the cells, and the cells, of course, can grow, but you don't have the information that you need to grow an organ. That information is lacking in a laboratory environment, and thus you only can grow the cells, but you cannot actually grow a functional organ. And these morphogenetic fields organize reality from the subatomic level to the macroscopic, even to the universal level. Even galaxies are controlled, or the information how galaxies form are in that morphogenetic field, at least in theory. And it's very important to note that these morphogenetic fields, again, have more a quantum character, because they're not electromagnetic, they're not within our space and time, they're outside. They're not dependent on space and time. And read Rupert Sheldrake's books. They're very, very interesting. He done also a lot of very interesting experiments to support his theory. And the idea is basically not that brand new. Aristotle also had that idea, that there is an information level in nature that controls whatever is in reality. He called that, I can't remember the name now, entelechy, sorry. Yeah, so the idea is not brand new, but the concept that Rupert Sheldrake has evolved with the morphogenetic, and especially how the fields interact with biology through morphogenetic resonance, that's, I think, Rupert Sheldrake was the first one who described that in more detail. And let's talk a little bit more about the homeostasis and about these regulation systems. And in general, this is also a kind of a science which is quite young. It came up in the more technical engineering department of universities in the 1950s to study these control cycles and these feedback loops that are not only in our organism, but also there are a lot of technical feedback loops, and a lot of technical machines need that feedback loops in order to control something or not to at the end of the day to crash down because some parameter or the other accelerates. So and in these control cycles, we always have a regulator, that's a regulation principle, and we have a correcting variable, and this correcting variable controls a control element, and we have a constant state of a system. So and then on the other hand, we have a feedback. So we have a probe that is sensing this state and giving a feedback to the regulator. So we could, for example, say an easy example for that is the body temperature. Normally we should have a temperature around 37 degrees, a little bit lower eventually, a little bit higher. So and we have sensors in our nervous system that give a feedback to the brain about the temperature in our body. So, and when the sun gets out and it gets like now springtime, eventually it gets some 20, 30 degrees and we're sitting in the sun, and eventually the body temperature would increase, would get higher, 37, 37.5, whatever. Then we would get a feedback to the brain and saying, well, wait a minute, it's getting warm here. We need to do something. We need to correct that. We need this is the control element, is the temperature. We need to correct that. So the brain would give an impulse to our sweat glands, and we would start sweating, and through the evaporation of the sweat, we cool down again. And vice versa, if it's too cold, we would suddenly start shivering. The muscles would start shivering, and through the friction of the muscles, we could create heat and thus warm up the body. So this is a very simple principle for this for a regulation process in our body. But of course, we have tons of these regulation processes, and they could get really, really complicated. And especially it gets complicated when these regulation principles get blocked by, for example, mental influence, or by alternating electrical fields of all kinds, or by some viruses or bacteria, or by some deficiencies of vitamins and minerals, and so forth. So these external factors could have an influence on our regulation systems, and could thus, if they persist, they could lead to a symptom, and if they still persist, could lead at least to a disease. And from electroacupuncture, we know, or that's basically derived from Chinese medicine, because Chinese medicine is, I think, the only medical system that really describes these principles, that also the organs have an interaction to each other. So if you would, and this is what is called causal chains in the body. So if we would, for example, look at the skin could be influenced by the kidney, could be influenced by the liver, pancreas, small and large intestine especially. You probably know that if you have somebody who is suffering a skin disease, eventually you would have to look at the large or small intestine, and there's the problem for the skin disease. So the skin disease is basically just the tip of the iceberg, and the underlying problem is the problem in the large intestine, and actually you would really have to treat the large intestine, and don't worry about the skin, but focus on the large intestine. And once that is in balance back again, the skin problems dissolves them by themselves. And those of you who have already done a Mars 3 analysis, you know that there are probably things coming out that at the first glance have nothing to do with the symptoms that the patient have. And here is the reason why. Because we are not focusing on the symptom when we do an analysis. We're focusing on the underlying regulation principles or regulation circuits in the body, and we try to find which regulation principle is blocked, where are blockages through what I have shown you before here. What is blocked through these through viruses, bacteria, through a lack of vitamins, minerals, and so forth. And thus we try to shine a light on these underlying principles and try to get these principles back in balance. And then the symptom, which is eventually the skin, or could be some problem with the large intestine, or could be some problem with the stomach, until these problems are then basically disappear by themselves just by focusing on the real causes for a disease. And the real causes are, it's not, as I said before, a single cause and effect chain. It's a very, very complex network. It's rather a network like a spider net. And if you lift it up at one edge, it has an effect on the whole system. There is not one single thing you can do that has not an effect on everything else. So that is why we focus when we balance somebody, why we focus on the values higher than 70%, because these are the real important rates that we want to bring back to balance in order to bring the whole system back in balance. Something which is also not widely known, but our teeth, they also have an energetic link to various organs, and they interact with each other. So if you have, for example, a problem here in your teeth up here, this could very well affect your pancreas and your stomach. So if you have a chronic hurt here, a chronic infection here under these teeth, it could very well affect your pancreas, your stomach. And once you resolve this problem here on this teeth, you will get rid of your stomach problems, and vice versa, of course. And again, these principles we could shine a light on with the Mars 3 analysis, and very, very quickly, within seconds, you get a view on this very, very complex structures. You could also test that manually if you have a test kit and use the pendulum, but you were sitting there for hours to find out all the materials that you need to shine a light on this very complex network. So I hope now you get an understanding of these two factors here, of the homeostasis and of what it means of taking in and processing information from the environment. So this will lead to the next question. Sorry, we are now already half an hour over, and yeah, I'll try to speed up. I really apologize for this. Yeah, I didn't plan it like that, but yeah, sorry. I'll make it quick. What is information? So I have talked a little bit about various different levels before, and about the material level, about the energetic level, and about the information level. And I've put it all together here in this chart. We have on the very bottom level, we have the material world. That's everything we can touch, our body, our biophysics and everything. And we have, of course, energy here, which is physical or chemical energy. This is heat. This is the energy our body consumes during the day. And these two levels here are bound to time and space in classical physics. And on these two levels, you will also find frequencies. So whatever you do with frequency therapy, be it Hulda Clark or Rife frequency, that's on this level here. You have a certain frequency, an electromagnetic swinging with a certain frequency, and that has an effect on the bioenergetic system of a body, be it a human body or be it an animal or a plant, doesn't matter. It's all the same. It's a biological system. So, but what we are doing with quantum response technology, we are really interacting with that biofield, with that morphogenetic field. There are tons of names for it, quantum field or whatever. And we call it for now biofield, info field, morphogenetic field, MGF, and we interact on that level. So, and the idea is that, as Rupert Sheldrake has described, we have through morphogenetic resonance, biological systems do interact with that morphogenetic field. And if you look, for example, at homeopathy, at a high level homeopathy, of which you might know that with a potency higher than a X23, there is no molecule anymore in any homeopathic remedy. So you could ask, why does that still has an effect on a human being or on an animal? Because it has the information, and it gives the appropriate information that the human being then can process. And we are working in quantum response technology. We're working only with information. The rates that we use are information coding bacteria, coding organs, coding substances, coding an affirmation, like from the example that I gave you before from my wife with this, when treating the baby. And here, this information level, you can see it on the side here. This is actually on a quantum level and is described by quantum physics, and thus it is time and space transcendental. So there is no time and space anymore. Whenever you put somebody on your Mars 3, it immediately has an effect on this person. Or if you have scanned in the person and the person is now on holiday, you've got your clinic, let's say in Vienna, and the person is on holiday in Egypt, no problem. And he says, well, of course, I have a problem with my stomach, I've eaten something bad. You could immediately run a scan on this person and find out what rates do you need to balance the person and so that he can enjoy his holiday further. Other than, of course, classical physics and any frequency therapy, which is bound to space and time. So, of course, if you would do a conventional treatment, you would have to wait until the person comes back from its holiday in Egypt, travels back all the way to Vienna, and then you could treat the person. So we are on this informational level, and now you might also have the explanation, why does balancing at a distance work? Because we are on this information level, and we are actually giving information, and through morphogenetic resonance, which is a natural thing, this information goes into the body of your client, and actually it starts a self-healing process. We are not giving any, we're not giving any biochemical substances, so we're just giving information that the body can process and can start a self-healing process. And another picture for why does non-locality, in quantum physics terms, this is called non-locality. Why does it work? And there's another physicist who explained that through what he called implicate order. That's David Bohm, a British physicist. And he said, or he gave the explanation that actually, if we are looking at a person, we see this picture, for example. Let's take here an example of a fish. We are this down here. This is our reality. This is our space-time. So, and if we see two separate objects, we see, for example, two fishes in two cameras. We think these are two separate objects. And we see, for example, one object, this is a fish here from the side, and the other object, fish from the front. But imagine if this fish, for example, looks at you, looks into the camera, he looks at you at the immediately same time, this fish here would look to the side. So, and the classical interpretation of that would be that these two fishes have reacted on the same signal, or they have spoken before and they have agreed to turn the head or something like that. That would be the classical interpretation. But the quantum interpretation of this observation is that these two separate objects are in reality only one object. And what we can see in our reality, in our world, are just two different aspects of this one object up here in the quantum world. It's just one fish, and we see two projections of this one fish. So that's why we think if these two projections react at the immediately same time, we think they have reacted to one signal or just by coincidence or whatever. But the truth is, it's just one fish, and we're seeing these two different aspects of this one fish. And if we keep that in mind, it's of course no problem that that healing at a distance works. So how does quantum response technology communicate with that information fields? And let me go back to this picture here again, and let's take our focus on this here. This is a Tesla coil, and what we do is this Tesla coil is a very, very specific type of coil. And as the name proposes, it goes back to a guy called Nikola Tesla. His name became famous again through this car brand Tesla, but it's got nothing to do with this guy. And he basically was an experimental physicist. He was a guy who invented the alternating current and was the first one who built a alternating current power station in Niagara Falls. And he has found a very interesting kind of geometry for coils. And from that special geometry of coils, normally from coils, there emits electromagnetic field. But with these special coils, they don't emit an electromagnetic field. They emit what is called a longitudinal wave or a scalar wave, because the electric and the magnetic component of that field is canceled out. And there's also a US patent for these kind of coils, and we are using, this is the original picture of the coil we use in the Mars 3 and under the input cup and the output cup, or also if you use the scope Q under the qubit, we have that coil. And you can see it's bifilar wound. I will explain in a minute what we mean with bifilar wounding. You can see there is here the cable coming in, and I cannot paint very well. It goes in circles right here to the middle, and there it makes a turn and goes back out again in the same direction to the other wire. And here's a schematic drawing. A normal coil is wound like this, and if you load currency into such a coil, it creates a magnetic field in a certain direction. And if you do a bifilar wounding, you have one coil creating a field into one direction, and the other coil is creating a field in the opposite direction, so that the two fields cancel out and you get basically a null field. And I have here another way of showing what that creates. We have here these, if you are feeding a wave D into one coil and a wave E into the other coil, so that they're opposite to each other, so that the maximum of wave D comes to the minimum of wave E, and the minimum of wave D comes to the maximum of wave E. You have a canceling effect. Basically, there's a null wave coming out, null wave F coming out there. While on the other hand, if you have a wave A and you have a wave B, and the maximum of wave E comes to the maximum of wave B, and the minimum of wave A comes to the minimum of wave B, these two add. So you have this here from A and this from B adds to a resulting wave C, which is basically A and plus B. And this would be called constructive interference. But what we have in our Tesla coils is a destructive interference. The two electromagnetic fields of the two coils cancel out each other so that we have basically a null field. And a very interesting experiment done by Karen Langer here in Germany. And just for your planning, so that you know, I might need eventually another 20 minutes, and then we really stop it for tonight or for this morning. Once again, I do apologize very quickly. Karen Langer did a very interesting experiment. I think what I will do, I will, to make it shorter now, I will attach this experiment. It has been published. I will attach the original publishing paper to the email that we send to you once this webinar is, once the recording is up for you to view, so that we can cut out this a little bit. But it's a very interesting experiment, just to tease you a little bit, because she really proved that you can see here are two Tesla coils, and this experiment has been done in a shielded room. You can see here on the back there are metal walls, so this is a completely metal shielded room. Otherwise, this experiment would not have been possible, because the signals she measured are very, very weak. And actually, I will spoil so much that here you can see a homeopathic remedy, and she really found a correlation between these scalar waves from Tesla and homeopathic remedies. So more will be in the email we send to you with the notification of the recording of that webinar. So I told several of times that we can imprint neutral substances with information, and that imprinted substance would then work as a homeopathic remedy. So you could ask, well, how should that work? There are two options we have in our Mars 3, and again, you will see that when we are discussing the database in part 3 of this webinar series. You could either scan in a substance, so I could, for example, take that hand cream and scan the information. And of course, we do not scan in any biochemical structure of a substance. We just scan in the information, and we convert that into a digital signal stored in the database. And when it comes to imprinting a substance, we use the opposite way. We take that rate that is stored in the database, and as I have shown you before, we convert it into a electrical signal and feed that electrical signal into our coil, and the coil will extract the information and imprint that onto the globules. Here we have some sugar globules, and we'll imprint that on the globules. And you have, of course, not a homeopathic remedy, but you have a kind of a remedy, an imprinted remedy that in the living system, be it now a human being, be it an animal, and of course also plants, acts like a real homeopathic remedy. Or as I told you before, my friend, he's using biochar as a carrier, not here sugar draggies. He puts biochar on here and loads the biochar with specific information that is needed for his agricultural projects, and thus charges the biochar with the information needed. So compared to classical homeopathy, where you have substances from animals, plants, or minerals, and you convert that into a homeopathic remedy, we have here substances scanned in the Mars 3 and use that as an information type kind of remedy, and and benefit the human being or the animal, of course. Or we use the rates, of course. We do not necessarily have to use substances. We can also use our rates and use them as a homeopathic-based remedy. One thing which is also very important to me is where do we differentiate from classical diagnostic means? Of course, we have ultrasonic, and if we sort these kind of diagnostic means into our chart with matter energy information, We of course have here, they only work on the energetic and material level. We have X-ray, we have MRT. There's missing here the conventional blood laboratory, blood biochemistry. That all works on the energetic and material, basically on the physical level. So these all don't give you any information about this field here. So let's say my wife, take that example again, she unfortunately, on our last journey to China, she broke her ankle. So of course we needed an MRT to see, is there something broken? How are the ligaments and so forth? And then she unfortunately got a surgery. And after the surgery, we did an X-ray to see, did the screws fit perfectly and everything. So we got all these, and God bless us, we have all these tools today. But none of these things did tell us, why did she stumble up there on the holy mountain in China? And this is something you could find out when you run a diagnosis or an analysis with a Mars 3. You could find in the information field, you could find, why does this accident happen? What kind of psychological themes are up there? And eventually, what affirmation do you need to treat that you can really learn something of that accident, and you can really change something eventually in your life, that this will not happen again, or even more severe things than this happens. A cancer develops or so, or whatever. So we do not want to have to erase all my painting here. We do not want to erase these things, or we do not want to substitute these things. We are happy that we have them, and we do not also not want to substitute blood diagnostics. But blood diagnostics can only tell you what is in the blood. It cannot tell you what is in the organ, what is in the cell. And we with the analysis we can run in the info field, we know what is in the cell, what is in what is called the matrix, the intracellular level, and the matrix, the so-called matrix. And so we do not want to replace this. We want to basically work together with this, with these kind of diagnostics, and with these kind of diagnostic means. And of course, we do not want to replace conventional medicine. We just want to add to it. And of course, you can very ideally combine your work with the Mars 3 with all other kind of therapy, with TCM, with homeopathy, with herbal therapy, with physiotherapy, with name it, with psychology, psychotherapy, and so yeah, we don't want to replace any other kind of therapy. We just want to add to it on a level where most other methods don't have any access to. That's the point. We add information, we give additional information which you cannot access with other means, or which you can eventually access, but need a lot more time. We give you a very quick, within a couple of seconds, we give you access to this information. If you're talking psychotherapy, my wife again has a case in her clinic where she had a girl with mutism, and she had this since she was 6. And when she was seeing my wife the first time, she was 15, and she was having tons of psychotherapy sessions. And within 6 sessions with color tuning, my wife could give the impulse that this girl started talking again. So we can access this information level much quicker, much more efficient than with other methods. Very quickly, I've been talking a lot of science stuff tonight. I don't know, I hope you could follow it. I hope I could make it a little bit more transparent to you. But just for you to, you might eventually think that I'm talking just bollocks here. But I'm actually not, because we've been invited to CERN in Geneva, and I very quickly browsed through that. You can search them in the internet. They're a very huge European nuclear research center, and I wasn't aware that that they're doing also medical research there. And they're actually, what they do, they accelerate proton beams. Here, this is a circle I don't remember, I think 250 meters underneath Geneva in Switzerland. And it's a huge 9.6 kilometers in diameter, huge circle. And they accelerate protons and smash the protons to each other. And then they try to research and try to find out what our matter is made of. So this is really serious physics. And these guys are one of the research group there. You can see the research team here in this picture. They have invited us, and they have used the Mars 3 in a study on autism. And this guy here is a professor for electromagnetism, and his name is Professor Periale. And he's actually, so I was discussing basically a lot of the stuff I taught you tonight or this morning. I was discussing with him, and we really confirmed that we know only so little of reality, little things. And every time, as I said, I from time to time I try to read some research papers, but we know so little. And I think the big malus, or the big thing about the pharmaceutical industry is not only that they produce a lot of harmful, but more or less also sometimes helpful chemicals, but I think the most difficult thing is that they give the impression that everything they do is scientifically proven, and they know the ins and outs of it, and which is just not the truth. I mean, a lot of pharmaceutical research is done by trial and error, and a lot of remedies have just been found by accident, and a lot of chemical reactions are not understood at all. It's just they just know that if you give that substance, this and this will happen, but they don't know the exact parameters and why this is happening. So there's a lot of dark areas in this research and in this science. So this Professor Periale said we only know that little, and there's so much possibilities. So, and I think it's really, well, it's not good if these scientific communities says this what we do is these are lies, or this you have to believe in it, and these things. It's not true. It's based on science as much as biochemistry and all the other things. It's just that we do not know a lot about it yet, but it's still a science, and it just has some different rules than eventually the biochemistry. But it's still a science, and still it's got, of course, its outcome. And here you can see this research group when we were training them and using the Mars 3. And as I said, they were researching the autism, and unfortunately we lost contact to that group. But this was really a very interesting stay there, and the following months we worked together with them were very, very, very interesting. I wanted to do a quick run through our products, but of course, because we've had so much, I used up so much of your time. Once again, I do apologize for it. If you're new to us, check out our website, www.copen.com, EN product overview. You will see all our products. Eventually, on one of my next webinars, I can touch that a little bit, so I will skip that. Even if you're not new, please visit our website, enroll for our newsletter, register for it so that you don't miss out any webinars or any of our activities. So I just skip. What else have you? Yeah, we have. I'll skip all that. Register for our newsletter. And before we come to the Q&A section, I want to point out, pencil that in your calendar, 23rd of April. That's in 2 weeks. Again, same time, 6 o'clock Central European time. We have the practical application. If you were missing this with all this theoretic talk, we will have a lot of practice in 2 weeks' time. And then also there's part 3 on the 7th of May and part 4 On the 21st of May, on part 2, I will, as I said, give you a run through the operation of the Mars 3. In part 3, I will discuss the database very much in a detail. And in part 4, we will talk about the color tuning system. And as I said, there will be a part 5 about the super tuning system, but that's to be announced. So stay tuned with us and enroll for our newsletter. And now we will come to the Q&A section. And I will go in the chat and check what you have asked in the chat if there are any questions. Yeah, I see there are some Mars 3 users, some Scope Q users, some MK12 users. And so let's start here. Let's start it with the vintage devices. There was a question if we have any rates book for the MK12. Yes, we do. We actually have an app. The Apple founder, Steve Jobs, always said there is an app for that. And we have also an app for that. Check out the Apple App Store for the app called Rates Book. And there you will find rates for the entire Mars 3 database. So it's about 60,000 rates. And we've converted them all into rates that fit onto a Mark 12. They don't fit on an ASLD 95 and they don't fit on an MK2 because the ASLD 95 and MK2 only have 15 rate dials. And some of these rates are quite long, but they fit on an MK12. And yeah, just so check out the Apple App Store. The rate is called Rates Book. And if you either browse in the Apple App Store Bruce Copen or browse the Rates Book app, you will find it. How did Copen find the rates? Yeah, he actually dowsed for them. He used the pendulum and dowsed for them on the MK devices. He was putting a substance on the input cup and then turning dial for dial until he get the reaction of the pendulum, and that's how he found the rates. So you can imagine that's a very, very timely process. Takes a lot of time, and yeah, and that's the way how he did it. And then of course he was proving these rates by using the remedies he has created with that, whether or using them in a practical sense and finding out whether they really work or not, or then if they didn't work, they had to fine tune them. Sorry, just need to have a bit of water. How you can distant treatment? I hope I have explained that clear enough. If you mean how you can do distant treatment in a practical term, we will cover that in 2 weeks' time in part 2 of that webinar. By the way, on our website, you'll also find a tab with webinars, and you can enroll for the next 2 webinars, or next 3 webinars. If you haven't done so yet, please check out our website. Go to the tab webinars, and there you can enroll for all the next webinars, the practical webinars. They're all free of charge, and we will all record them and supply the recording afterwards. Then there was the question with the Mars can make remedies. Yes, you can. Again, I will show this next time how you can do this practically. But yes, you can create remedies. Then there is another question. It looks like before, like 25 years ago, it not need to take lots of remedies to be better. Now it looks that we have to take big amount of remedies to be well. What is the reason for that? Is it possible to do something with that? Yes, I think I touched on that before. I think from my opinion, the reason for that is that we have today much higher impact of environmental poisoning, and not only biochemical poisoning, but also what is called electrosmog. Everybody's running around with these kind things here today with mobile phones, and we have the work environment has changed. We have eventually a lot more stress. If I remember my father, he went to work in the morning 7, came home at 4 o'clock. He was working for Siemens, and then he retired in the age of by the age of 55, and I think work life back then, although he was a manager in Siemens, so he probably had during that 8 hours he had a lot of stress. But 4 o'clock it was finished, and he went home, could relax. The weekends he had free. And today, working in home office, having this mobile phone, if you don't respond to a WhatsApp within 50 minutes, the other person probably thinks you're dead or what. So there's the expectation of immediate response. You have to reply to emails, you have to reply to WhatsApps, you have to reply to whatever communication channels. Back in the days, somebody sent you a letter and didn't expect a reply a week later because the letter took 3 days until it reached you. Then you had to read it, had to reply to it, and eventually a week, 2 weeks later, this person had the reply. So, and I think that has changed a lot in the last 30 years. And I think that's the reason why healing somebody is so much complex today, and while people all develop more and more diffuse kind of symptoms. It's not a clear diagnosis anymore. It's more pain here, pain there, and so I think that's the reason why. So the next question is: it means that you have to run tests every day? No, that does not mean you have to run a test every day. Interesting enough, it shows that if you do that first scan and you work with whatever came up in the first scan, you work with it for minimum a week, and then you could do a rescan. And rescan means you eventually load the rates, the result from the first scan, and check what are the rates you still need. And a complete rescan is not necessary before, let's say, 4 weeks, because the body, the information changes very, very quickly, but the body needs time, the cells needs time to adjust to it. And you need these 3-4 weeks until it makes sense to do a complete new rescan. But we can also discuss that next time, and I can show you how to do a retest of first scan. And but normally you work with that first scan, you work for at least for a week, and after a week it's eventually possible to do a rescan. But a complete rescan, don't do it before 4 weeks, because that's the time the body needs to adjust. Unless you have a very acute state, then it would make sense to eventually adjust things quicker after 3 to 4 days, do a rescan and adjust the setting to whatever is needed then. But in chronic cases, a month and then a retest is enough. Next question was: if you broadcast to a location like a house or garden, what is the radius of sphere of action? Will it broadcast to the whole house or property, or will it target only specific person or living in that area, or being living in that area? No, if you can broadcast to in agricultural projects, you can broadcast to a whole field of several acres. Or if you treat forest, you could treat a whole forest of several acres. So there is no limit to that, because remember, we are on that information level, and on that information level there is no space and time. So there is basically no size of that object, because we treat only if you want to treat a house, for example, for geopathic stress or whatever, you only treat that house in let's say C Street 1 in Cologne or whatever, in Berlin. So that defines that house, and on the whole world there's only one house there. So that in the frame of information field is a clear definition of the target. So if you broadcast to that house because there's a bad energy there or whatever, then it will affect the whole house. If you want to affect the person, you always need a personal sample, like a hair sample or a blood sample or sputum, or you need to scan in that person from the hand applicators. That's always what you need when you want to scan a person or an animal. Then the next question was, is it possible to try treatment to see how it works in the distance? Yes, of course, it's possible. You can treat somebody and ask him, do you feel better? Because that's always the most important implication. Does the person feel better after a balancing? And of course, you can do it to try if it works. Then the next question was, how many treatments do you need to be rid of the disease? That definitely cannot be answered. As I said, in an acute case, or the case study I gave to you before, for my wife with this little babies, that was a treatment which was taking place over a period of eventually 2 weeks or so. And eventually, if you treat acute cases, sometimes you do one treatment and that solves the case. But sometimes, if it's chronic cases, it takes weeks, months, and sometimes, of course, you cannot heal somebody fully, but at least you can eventually help that the symptoms get better. Or we had taken part in a study back in I think it was in the year 2000 on distant treatment. I've taken part with back in the days with the MK12 of Bruce Copen, because the Mars 3 wasn't finished by then. And it was a general study on distant treatment. So there were different methods of distant treatment. And there was quite a large target group of, I think it was 200 persons that were in that study. And one thing that came out very prominent was that people that got distant treatment felt more motivation to life again. They were more positive again. So the psychology changed first. But of course, the Mars 3 is not a tool where we can guarantee healing. Eventually, we cannot. It doesn't help at all. Of course, we also have these cases where it doesn't help anything at all. But you must also say there are a lot of factors to this, and eventually we can discuss this on one of the more practical parts of this webinars, because there are people who do therapist hopping. They go to this therapist, get acupuncture, and they only have 2 sessions there. Oh, it didn't work. They go to the next one. He's doing homeopathy, get 2 sessions there. Oh, it didn't work. And they go to the next one, the physiotherapist. And these people, and the interesting thing is, if you run a scan on them, you get a complete confused energy system with these people. And you need quite a while. And you can tell that by the results you get in a Mars 3 scan. You get a result from here, from there, from everywhere, but not a clear red line. And these are the people who are kind of confused energetically, and you need a couple of balancing treatments to get them back in a line. But eventually, this person then already is gone because he's hopping off to the next therapist. So there are a lot of factors that play a role there. But I guess eventually, yes, we cover it in the next webinars. So to give an answer to this question, it could work with just one session, but it could also take a couple of sessions, 10 sessions, 20 sessions, or over a longer period of time. And of course, it could not help at all. Next question. What is the difference between Mars 3 and BICOM machine? Why you do not use Kolb like in BICOM? It's also a bit of a complex answer to this. The short answer is to this is BICOM is working on the physical, energetical level, and we're working on the information level. BICOM is trying to invert pathological frequencies and cancel them out. So they have a different approach than what we do in the coils, but we are working on different levels. They can, of course, work hand in hand. So you could, for example, run a scan on the Mars 3 and create some globules and put the globules in the BICOM device and do the treatment with the BICOM device. But so they can work hand in hand, but they work on different levels. Also, eventually, some of you do know Ryonex. Ryonex is also a different thing, working on a different level. Next question is Scope 8 software already in English? Yes, it is. We are running the final proofreading on the database, but we have a preliminary version of the Scope 8 software, and it's available. If you're interested, please contact us. It's office@copen.de or copen.com, office@copen.com, and write to us. We can give you a quote. And the demonstration I will do next week, you will in 2 weeks' time, sorry, in a fortnight, they will be on the Scope 8 software in English. Yeah, Anna said, I wish you could finish. I'm so sorry, Anna, really. But I hope you can see this recording. And yeah. Next question is, how real are the answers for allergy test? I tested my mom and resulted allergy to almost all. How could that be possible? Yes, this is a very good question. And I have a very profound answer to this. Reason is the Mars 3 is used by a number of companies who are offering food intolerance tests through the internet. So people send them hair samples and they run a test and then give back their report. And it just recently had been acquired by a laboratory in Berlin. They also, they're specialized on veterinary tests. And we also have a company here in Germany doing the same thing. So with the Mars 3, these companies run roughly about 50,000 tests. All these companies together run about 50,000 tests, food intolerance every month with the Mars 3. And so to give a short answer, what people have observed that follow the proposals that have been given by a Mars 3 scan is that symptoms that the people have, allergic symptoms, food intolerance symptoms, they might disappear. Again, of course, there's no guarantee. And there's one very important thing you have to be very, very careful with. If you have a proven IgE, IgG allergy, like, for example, one of my staff members, he's allergic to fish. And if you have that approved allergy and it does not show up in the Mars 3, please do not say then, okay, fish does not show up there, so I can eat fish. No. Again, we have different levels here. The allergy test or the intolerance test that is done in the Mars 3 shows the structure in your whole body. And if you follow the recommendations, you avoid the food that is recommended by the Mars 3 scan, eventually your overall situation will clear out. Because in a lot of allergies, there is an intoxication with viruses, bacteria, and so forth. And so the allergy, again, is only the tip of the iceberg. And so to answer your question, yes, it's possible that you get a lot of allergies. Well, these are not allergies in a medical sense. These are more intolerances. So your energy system reacts very sensitive to it. And if you avoid that food for at least 2 to 3 months, you will realize that, or again, please, this is not guarantee. This is just what has been experienced. In a lot of thousands of cases, your symptoms might improve. And that's also what the people at this laboratory in Berlin told me. They said they have customers. Of course, they're animals, so there's pets. And the people have told them they have pets, they have food intolerances, and they've got an IgG, IgE test. They changed the diet according to that blood test from a conventional laboratory, but the symptoms haven't changed. And then they changed the diet according to a bioenergetic test, and suddenly the symptoms changed. And I had the one guy here who started the business in Germany with these laboratory tests with a Mars 3. When he first approached me and we were talking about reproducibility and so forth, and he was very skeptical about, finally he decided to buy a Mars 3 and start his business. This was about 5-6 years ago. And he's got now, I think, his third Mars 3 and is selling 14,000 tests a month. And he said reproducibility is no problem for him anymore. He's got so many positive feedback from people who followed his instructions and got better, that he is not worried about any of these obstacles, in brackets, that he first has occurred. Can I write the app down? Yes, I can in the chat. The app is called Rates Book. Sorry, Rates Book. Put that in the chat. Can one rate antidote each other? No, the concept of antidote we don't have on that information level. And with the Mars 3 scan, you will see how many percent this rate is relevant. And if you stick to this recommendation, I know this is very, very difficult for a trained homeopath, because you will get a list of homeopathic remedies, a list of potencies, which is really weird. We will see this in 2 weeks when we do the practical seminar. And a homeopath, when I say, oh God, no, you can't do this. Yes, you can, because this is a different level. Remember, we have asked the body has replied, yes, he needs it in that way. And he needs it exactly in that mixture. So if you apply that, you will see it will work. It might, of course, not work, but you cannot do any harm. And there is no antidote in the classical homeopathic way. Next question. What do I have to add to the database to help my 75-year-old mother-in-law with chronic leukemia? I would ask you to, because this is quite a complex question which cannot be easily answered in one sentence. I would ask you to send us an email to training@copen.de. That's Elke Kugler, our lady in charge for all our trainings, and she can help you with that. So please send a message to training@copen.de. She can help you with how to pose the focusing, and we will also cover that in 2 weeks' time when we talk about the testing. Why if I scan, next question, why if I scan there are some results, and if I scan a second time later, I may change a lot? I hope I have answered this question already. This is the question about the reproducibility, because in fact, there is no reproducibility. We change every second, and I hope you have taken something from these last 2 hours, and so you have changed, so you're not the same person anymore like when we started this webinar, and so every second we change. Next question, how does rate of a particular remedy know so to destroy microorganisms? That is a misconception, I think. We do not actually destroy the microorganism. I think it was Pasteur who said, le microbe c'est rien, c'est mieux, le mieux c'est tout. The microorganism is nothing, the environment is everything. So what I think happens when you treat somebody, even if you treat with the Hulda Clark Sapper or with you treat with Rife frequencies or whatever, I think what changes is the environment and the body. So the environment changes, so the microorganism doesn't feel comfortable in there anymore and just moves away by itself. I think that what happens, and I tried to explain to you before about the tons of regulative processes we have in our organism, and so I think that's what's actually happening. The body is so intelligent. I mean, do you have to tell your body to breathe in, out every what is it, 4 seconds or whatever, or do you have to tell your body to regulate the blood pressure? No, you don't. He's doing this all on his own. He's got his own intelligence, and he's got his own concepts to react on certain things, and we're just helping him by giving him some information and some hint there, and starting this self-healing process and supporting this self-healing process. But the body is clever enough to get rid of these bacteria again. And I think that's what actually happening also when you use the zapper. You don't not really destroy the microorganism. You just make it uncomfortable for him, and the body then just gets rid of them himself. And then there is the last question: can a Mars 3 work as efficiently as Holder Clark zapper? I would definitely say yes. It's just again on a different level. The Holder Clark zapper works on this physical energy level, and we're working on the information level. But I think at the end of the day, you will have the same result with both systems. But of course, I think I don't want to dismiss the zapper concept here. It's of course a great thing, and people have great results with it. So I don't want to say anything against it at all. But I think with our system, you have a wider range of parameters. We're not only focusing on the microorganisms, we focus also on the soul. We have psychological stuff in there. You will see it next in 2 weeks. We have the chakras in there. We have a lot larger variety than you have with a zapper. But I think both systems, of course, work efficiently in their boundaries. But if you have a Mars 3 and you're thinking of buying a zapper, you don't have to, because you don't get any more benefit from a zapper if you already have a Mars 3. So then there is another question coming in. Does the Mars 3 portable card with the therapy can influence the water if you put it under a stainless steel bottle? Yes, of course it can. We have a webinar. We had 3 webinars with my friend Raphael, who is a specialist in water treatment. And that's basically how he treats water. He's doing, of course, a lot more to it. If you want and you can manage with subtitles, there are 3 webinars in YouTube from us. Check out our YouTube channel. If you search in YouTube for Bruce Copen Laboratories, you will find our YouTube channel, and there are 3 complete webinars on water. But yes, to give a short answer to your question, you can put even the water in the input cup, run a scan on it, and treat it as you would treat a human being, and program the rates you found on the card, and then you put the card under the steel bottle. So finally, sorry, 1.5 hours, nearly more than planned. I think I eventually you want to plan in for, if you attend in 2 weeks' time, you want to plan more time right from the start. Guys, thank you very much. We still have 10 attendees. You're the hard task force, the radionics task force. Thank you very much for staying with me so long, and for spending your time tonight, this morning, this lunchtime, this late night, wherever you are. Thank you very much. I hope there was a little bit of impulse you could take with you, and that could improve your work. And of course, I would be very, very happy if I see you again in 2 weeks' time. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to info@copen.com. So wherever you are, have a great day, have a good sleep, have a good night, have a nice remaining afternoon, and thank you so much for staying with me. See you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.